The morning sky over Seoul burned crimson as the Kethrin harvesting ships descended like metallic vultures. Captain Lee Dae-ho pressed his back against the concrete barrier, watching helplessly as the energy nets swept through the city's streets. Below, collecting humans like grain. 23 years had passed since the Kethrin Collective first arrived with their false promises of peace and technological advancement. Humanity had welcomed them as saviors, eager to join the galactic community. Now Dae-ho understood the truth. They had been livestock being prepared for slaughter. The memories of that first day still haunted him. The massive ships had arrived. In Earth's orbit like silver moons, their surfaces gleaming with patterns that hurt to look at directly. The Kethrin ambassadors had emerged from their vessels wearing environmental suits that made them appear almost human in shape, though their true forms remained hidden beneath the gleaming metal and glass. "We come in peace." Their leader had announced through translation devices that somehow spoke every human language perfectly. "We offer knowledge, technology, and membership in the great galactic community." World leaders had fallen over themselves to welcome the visitors. Trade agreements were signed within weeks. Technology exchanges began immediately. The Kethrins provided medical advances that cured diseases, energy systems that ended pollution, communication networks that connected every corner of Earth instantly. But there had been signs, if anyone had been watching carefully enough. The medical scans they requested were too detailed, too focused on human physiology. The tracking devices they installed in their technology were too sophisticated for simple trade monitoring. The questions they asked about human population centers, military capabilities, resource distribution were too specific. Dae-ho had been a young military officer then, stationed at the Joint Alien-Human Research Facility in Busan. He had watched the Kethron scientists work with growing unease. They moved with the cold efficiency of farmers examining livestock, measuring and cataloging with clinical detachment. "Sir, the western districts have fallen," reported Kim Sora, her voice crackling. Through the damaged CUM unit, the young intelligence officer had been tracking the alien movements from their underground command post. It's estimated 12 million taken in the last 6 hours. The harvesting had begun at dawn 3 days ago. The Kethrins had activated hidden systems and all their gifted technologies simultaneously. Medical devices became paralysis weapons. Communication networks became tracking systems. The energy plants became power sources for massive collection beams that swept across cities like invisible hands. Dae-ho had been in the Seoul Command Center when the first reports came in. At first, they thought it was some kind of technical malfunction. The energy readings were off the charts, but the Kethrin technology had always been mysterious. Then the screaming started. The harvesting beams didn't kill. They were far more efficient than that. The energy field would wash over a person, and they would simply stop moving, their bodies becoming rigid as statues. Then the collection ships would arrive, their cargo holds opening like the mouths of mechanical whales, and the paralyzed humans would be drawn up into the darkness. Military response had been swift but useless. Every weapon system that relied on modern technology had been compromised. The Kethrins had spent 23 years learning exactly how human defense systems worked, and they had prepared countermeasures for everything. Fighter jets fell from the sky as their electronics failed. Tanks became immobile as their computer systems crashed. Even simple radios went silent, but some things still worked. Old equipment, analog systems, and anything that had been built before the Kethrin arrival remained functional. It wasn't much, but it was enough to coordinate a retreat. Dae-ho clenched his fists as another wave of harvesting beams lit up the horizon. The Kethrin technology rendered human weapons useless, their psychological warfare breaking entire armies. Before they could fire a shot, but something stirred in his chest. Not despair, but a cold, calculating fury. He had spent years studying alien technology, learning their systems, understanding their methods. The Kethrons were efficient, but they were also predictable. They followed patterns, protocols, and procedures with mechanical precision. They had harvested dozens of species across the galaxy using the same methods, and they expected humanity to react like all the others. But humans were different. Where other species had panicked or surrendered, Some humans had started to adapt. Small groups were learning to use the old equipment, to move without detection, to strike back in ways the Kethrans hadn't anticipated. Sir Sora continued. We're receiving reports from cells in Tokyo, London, and New York. They're requesting permission to begin Phase 2. Phase 2. The plan they had developed in the deep bunkers beneath the city. It was desperate, dangerous, and probably impossible. But it was also the only chance they had. Daiho looked out at the burning city one last time. Somewhere in those harvesting ships, millions of his people were being processed like cattle. But the Kethrans had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that once broken, humanity would stay broken. Fall back to the bunkers, he ordered. It's time we learned. To hunt? The retreat began immediately. Small groups of survivors moved through the underground tunnels carrying whatever equipment they could salvage. They would regroup, rearm, and return. The Kethrans thought they were predators, but they were about to learn what it meant to be prey. 5 years into the occupation, the resistance had grown from scattered survivors into a formidable network. In the depths of abandoned subway tunnels beneath Busan, Park Min-ho carefully calibrated the stolen Kethran energy rifle, its alien components now integrated with human electronics. The weapon looked strange in his hands, like a metal snake twisted into the shape of a gun. Blue energy pulsed along its length, and when he squeezed the trigger, it hummed with deadly power. But this wasn't the same weapon the Kethrans had used against humanity. Min-ho had torn it apart and rebuilt it, adding human circuits and programming. That made it faster and more accurate than the original. The frequency modulation is stable, announced Dr. Choi Ji-woo from her makeshift laboratory. The former physicist had become their lead xenotechnology specialist. Reverse engineering captured equipment with an ingenuity that surprised even the resistance leadership. We can finally match their shield frequencies. Gil-woo stood surrounded by tables covered in alien technology. Pieces of Kethron equipment lay scattered like the organs of metal animals. She had spent months learning how each part worked, how they connected, and most importantly, how they could be improved. Her hands moved with practiced skill as she connected wires and adjusted settings. The laboratory had once been a subway maintenance room. Now it was the heart of humanity's technological revolution. Every piece of equipment they captured was brought here, taken apart, studied, and rebuilt. The Kethrans had given humanity advanced technology as a gift, but they had never expected humans to truly understand it. Daiho studied the tactical displays, showing resistance cells across the globe. What the Kethrans hadn't anticipated was humanity's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and improvise. While other species followed predictable patterns of resistance, humans constantly evolved new strategies. The screens showed hundreds of green dots scattered across a map of the world. Each dot represented a resistance cell, a group of humans who had refused to surrender. Some were large, organized groups with sophisticated equipment. Others were just families hiding in basements, armed with old hunting rifles and homemade explosives. But they were all connected now. The communication network that Ji-woo had built from captured alien technology allowed instant coordination across the globe. When a cell in Tokyo discovered a new weakness in Kethran armor, cells in London and New York knew about it within minutes. Sir Min-ho reported testing his modified weapon on a piece of Kethran metal. The energy beam cut through it like paper. The new rifles are ready for field testing. We've increased their power output by 40%. The transformation had been gradual but remarkable. In the first year after the invasion, humans had been helpless against Kethran technology. Their weapons were useless, their defenses were compromised, and their communication was cut off. But slowly they had learned to fight back. It started with small things. Humans discovered that old mechanical devices still worked when electronics failed. They learned to move through areas where Kethran sensors couldn't detect them. They found ways to disable alien equipment using simple tools and basic chemistry. Then they began to capture Kethran technology. At first, it was just broken pieces left behind after battles. But as the resistance grew bolder, they started planning raids specifically to steal alien equipment. Each successful raid brought more technology to analyze and more knowledge to share. Intelligence reports 3 more harvesting stations in the Gyeonggi province, Sora briefed from her communication post. But sir, we've also intercepted star charts. Earth isn't their only target. The communication station was a marvel of human engineering. Sora had built it using parts from dozens of different sources. Kethrin transmitters provided the power, human computers processed the data, and modified satellite dishes captured signals from across the galaxy. The star charts had been the most shocking discovery. The Resistance had always assumed that Earth was special, that humanity was the Kethrin's primary target. But the intercepted communications told a different story. The revelation hit the command center like a shockwave. The Kethrins were conducting a galaxy-wide harvesting operation. And humanity was just one species among many being systematically exterminated. Daeho stared at the star charts in silence. Red marks indicated worlds that had already been harvested. Yellow marks showed worlds currently under attack. Green marks represented worlds scheduled for future harvesting. There were hundreds of them, scattered across the galaxy like a farmer's planting schedule. How many species? He asked quietly. At least 67 that we can identify, Sora replied. And sir, some of these harvesting operations have been going on for centuries. The Kethrins have been doing this for a very long time. The implications were staggering. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, their populations processed, like crops. Worlds that had once been home to billions of intelligent beings were now empty, their resources stripped away, and their cultures destroyed. But there was something else in the data that caught Daeho's attention. The Kethrins had been remarkably successful in their harvesting operations. Most species had been completely eliminated within a few years. Some had lasted longer, but none had ever fought back effectively, until now. Sir Ji-woo called from her laboratory. Been analyzing the communication patterns. The Kethrins are confused. They're requesting additional resources, changing their standard procedures. I've never encountered a species that adapts as quickly as we do. Daeho smiled grimly. The Kethrins had made a mistake. They had assumed that humans would react like every other species they had harvested. They had expected panic, surrender, and eventual extinction. Instead, they had created something they had never faced before, a species that learned from every defeat and grew stronger with every challenge. 8 years of underground warfare had transformed the Resistance into something the Kethrins never expected: an army of innovators. At 0300 hours, modified Kethrin fighters piloted by human crews emerged from hidden bases across every continent simultaneously. The ships rose from concealed hangars, buried deep beneath mountains, from underwater bases hidden in ocean trenches, and from camouflaged facilities built inside abandoned cities. Each aircraft was a masterpiece of human engineering, taking the sleek Kethron designs and making them deadlier, faster, and more unpredictable. Captain Park Min-ho gripped the controls of his fighter as it shot through the early morning darkness. Above the Pacific Ocean, the ship responded to his thoughts as much as his hands. Its neural interface modified with human brain patterns that made it impossible for Kethron systems to predict or counter. "Phoenix Squadron, form up on my wing," he commanded, watching as dozens of other fighters emerged from their hiding places. The ocean below was suddenly alive with ships, their engines creating trails of blue fire across the water. Units. This is Operation Cleansing Dawn. Daeho's voice echoed through the comm networks as he led the assault from the captured command ship Retribution. Today, we take back our world. The Retribution was once a Kethrin heavy cruiser, captured during a daring raid 2 years earlier. But the ship that now cut through Earth's atmosphere looked nothing like its original design. Human engineers had rebuilt it from the inside out, adding weapon systems that fired faster than anything the Kethrons had ever created. Shields that could adapt to any attack, and engines that could outrun anything in the alien fleet. Daeho stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display show hundreds of human ships moving into position around the globe. Each group had been trained for this moment, practicing their attacks in secret bases. Hidden beneath the Earth's surface, The coordinated global strike caught the occupying forces completely unprepared. Human pilots, trained in unpredictable maneuvers, that defied Kethron tactical doctrine, systematically destroyed the harvesting infrastructure above New York. It's the massive harvesting station that had processed millions of humans over the past 8 years suddenly found itself under attack from directions that should have been impossible. Human fighters dove at it from below, emerging from the city's underground tunnel system like missiles fired from hidden launchers. The Kethron defenders tried to respond, but their weapons couldn't track targets that moved like no other species. In the galaxy, where alien pilots followed straight lines and predictable patterns, human pilots twisted and turned through the air like birds avoiding a storm. Target the main processing center, Minho ordered as his squadron approached the harvesting station. His modified weapons charged with power that made the air around his ship glow with deadly energy. Park Minho's modified weapons proved devastatingly effective against alien shielding. The energy beams cut through Kethron defenses like hot knives. Through ice. Systems that had protected the aliens for centuries failing in seconds. The harvesting station's shields flickered and died. Its weapons went silent. Then Minho's squadron opened fire with everything they had. The explosion could be seen from space, a brilliant flash of light that marked the destruction of 8 years of human suffering. Similar explosions were happening around the world as every major Kethron installation came under simultaneous attack. In the primary command facility, Gu's team raced to extract intelligence data while the battle raged overhead. Had led a ground assault on the main Kethron command center, fighting through corridors filled with alien technology to reach the central computer core. Download everything, she ordered her team, as they connected their modified computers to the alien systems. We need their communications, their star charts, their battle plans. The facility shook as human fighters strafed the building above them. Gi-Woo worked frantically, her fingers flying over controls that would have been impossible for humans to operate just 8 years ago. But she had learned to read Kethron symbols, to understand their computer languages, to think like they. Thought Admiral, we've got everything: star charts, harvesting schedules, locations of 37 other targeted worlds. The data was more valuable than any weapon. It showed the entire scope of the Kethron operation, the locations of every harvesting fleet, the schedules for future attacks, and most importantly, the locations of worlds that were currently under attack. As the last Kethron forces fled Earth's atmosphere, humanity faced a choice. They could rebuild in isolation. They could ensure no other species would suffer as they had. Daeho watched the alien ships disappear into the darkness of space, their engines leaving trails of red light as they retreated. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The choice was obvious. For 8 years, humans had suffered under Kethron occupation. They had watched their cities burn, their people taken, their world nearly destroyed. But they had also learned something important. They were not helpless. They had proven that the Kethrons could be defeated, that their technology could be captured, and improved that their strategies could be countered. Most importantly, they had learned that somewhere in the galaxy, their species were suffering the same fate that had nearly befallen humanity. Daeho's decision was immediate. Prepare the fleet. We're going hunting. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the Retribution and its escort ships for interstellar travel. The star charts showed worlds under attack, species being harvested, civilizations being destroyed. But now they would learn what it meant to be hunted by humans. The Human Liberation Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Ross 128 system, where intelligence indicated the peaceful Valeth. Civilization was under active harvesting. Admiral Lee Daeho stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as his modified fleet took formation. The sight before them was sickeningly familiar. Massive Kethron harvesting ships hung in orbit around the blue-green world below. Their cargo holds glowing with the energy signatures of collection beams. But this time, humanity wasn't the victim watching helplessly from the ground. Kethron, harvesting ships detected, reported Commander Kim Sora from the sensor station. Estimated civilian casualties in the millions. The numbers hit Daeho like a physical blow. Millions of innocent beings were being processed at this very moment, their lives ending in the cold mechanical efficiency of Kethron harvest operations. But unlike 8 years ago, when Earth had faced this nightmare alone, today would be different. "Status report on the Valeth Defense Forces?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Minimal resistance detected," Sora replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Their ships are using primitive kinetic weapons. They're not even scratching the Kethran shields." Deho watched the tactical display showing the one-sided battle below. Small Valeth ships, sleek and silver-like metal fish, darted around the massive harvesting vessels, firing projectile weapons that bounced harmlessly off alien shields. It was exactly how Earth's military had fought in those first desperate hours before their technology was completely overwhelmed. The Valeth were brave, but they were fighting with tools that were useless against Kethran technology. Their ships moved in formation patterns that were easy to predict. Their weapons followed standard military doctrine, and their communications were unencrypted. They were fighting by the rules, while the Kethrans had no rules at all. From the tactical station, we're receiving a transmission from the Valeth fleet. They're requesting immediate assistance. The alien voice came through the universal translator with desperation that needed no translation. "Unknown vessels, this is Fleet Commander Valeth of the Valeth Defense Force. Our world is under attack by hostile aliens. We have lost 60% of our fleet, and our planetary defenses are failing. Please, if you can help us, we beg you to intervene." Deho looked at the faces around his bridge. Each of them remembered the same helplessness, the same desperation, the same feeling of watching their world die while they could do nothing to stop it. "All ships. Attack pattern Delta 7, Deho ordered. The human fleet moved with a fluidity that would have been impossible for the rigid Kethran hierarchy to predict. The human ships didn't announce their presence or demand surrender. They simply attacked with the cold efficiency of predators who had learned to hunt. Retribution led the assault, its weapons charging with power that made space itself seem to bend around the ship. Minho's tactical display showed the human fleet spreading out in a formation that looked random but was actually carefully calculated. Each ship took a position that would allow maximum firepower while minimizing the risk of friendly fire. It was a dance of destruction that the Kethrans had never seen before. "Fire," Deho ordered. The battle was swift and decisive. Human ships, equipped with hybrid technology and unpredictable tactics, systematically destroyed the harvesting operation while evacuating Valeth survivors. The first salvo caught the Kethran ships completely off guard. Energy beams that had been modified with human engineering cut through alien shields like they were made of paper. The harvesting ships, designed for efficiency rather than combat, found themselves facing weapons that were specifically designed to kill them. "Target the collection arrays," Minho called out, coordinating the attack. "Don't let them complete the harvest." Human fighters swarmed around the massive harvesting vessels like angry insects, their small size and unpredictable movement patterns making them nearly impossible to target. They fired focused beams at the collection systems, disrupting the harvesting process and freeing thousands of Valeth civilians who had been trapped in the energy nets. The Kethran response was predictable and therefore useless. Their ships moved in standard defensive formations, their weapons fired in calculated patterns, and their communications followed established protocols. But the humans had studied those protocols for 8 years, learning every weakness and preparing counters for every strategy. "Kethran heavy cruiser attempting to escape," Sora reported. "Should we pursue?" "Let it go," Deho ordered. "We want survivors to report back. Let them tell their commanders what happened here." It marked the first time in galactic history that a former prey species had returned as hunters. The Kethrans had spent centuries perfecting their harvesting operations, confident that no species could resist their overwhelming technological advantage. But they had never faced a species that learned from every defeat and grew stronger with every challenge. "Sir," Minho reported from the tactical station, "we've confirmed the elimination of all harvesting vessels. The Valeth homeworld is secure." The tactical display showed the aftermath of the battle. Kethran ships were either destroyed or fleeing, their harvesting operations permanently disrupted. But more importantly, the display showed thousands of Small dots representing rescued Valith civilians being transferred to human medical ships. As rescue ships collected survivors, Deho realized they had crossed a threshold. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for justice across the galaxy. The Valith fleet commander's voice came through the communications. Again, but this time, it was filled with wonder rather than desperation. Unknown vessels. We cannot express our gratitude. Who are you? How did you defeat them so easily? Deho smiled grimly as he activated the communication system. We are humanity, and we remember what it's like to be prey. 2 years later, Admiral Deho commanded a coalition of 18 liberated worlds from the bridge of the massive dreadnought, Earthstrike. The galaxy had been fundamentally altered as former prey species united under human tactical leadership, systematically hunted down the remaining collective forces. The bridge of the Earthstrike is a testament to humanity's transformation. The massive command center stretched across 3 levels, filled with stations operated by beings from a dozen different species. Valith communications officers worked alongside human tactical specialists. Therian engineers monitored weapon systems built from captured Kethran technology. And at the center of it all, Admiral Deho coordinated the largest liberation fleet in galactic history. Final approach to the Kethran core worlds, announced Captain Park Minho from the helm. Around them, the combined liberation fleet stretched. Across space, hundreds of ships representing dozens of species that had once been marked for harvesting. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying. Ships of every imaginable design moved in perfect formation through the darkness of space. Human dreadnoughts led the charge, their hulls bristling with weapons that could tear apart planets. Cruisers provided electronic warfare support, their advanced sensors mapping every Kethran defense. Therian fighters swarmed around the larger vessels like deadly silver insects, their pilots eager for revenge against the species that had nearly destroyed their homeworld. Admiral reported Commander Kim Sora from the intelligence station. We're detecting massive defensive installations around the Kethran homeworld. They've had 2 years to prepare for this attack. Deho studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The Kethran defenses were impressive orbital weapons platforms, shield generators, and a defensive fleet that outnumbered the liberation forces 3-1. But they were still thinking like predators, trying to protect their territory from other predators. They had never learned to defend against prey that had become hunters. All ships begin the final assault, Deho ordered. Remember, we're not just fighting for our own species today. We're fighting for every species the Kethrans have ever harvested. The battle for the Kethran homeworld was the culmination of humanity's transformation from prey to predator. The Liberation Fleet moved with a coordination that defied every principle of galactic warfare. Ships from different species with different technologies and different fighting styles worked together as if they were parts of a single organism. Human ships provided the main assault force, their weapons cutting through Kethran defenses with surgical precision. Valith vessels jammed enemy communications and sensors, blinding the defenders to the true scope of the attack. Therian fighters targeted specific systems with the accuracy of trained assassins, disabling key installations at exactly the right moments. The Kethran response was predictable and therefore doomed. Their ships moved in standard formations, their weapons fired in calculated patterns, and their tactics followed the same protocols they had used for centuries. But the Liberation Fleet had studied those protocols for years, learning every weakness and preparing counters for every strategy. Breaching the orbital defense grid, Minho reported as the Earthstrike fired its main weapons. The massive energy beams punched through Kethran shields like they were made of paper. Clearing a path for the smaller ships to follow, the battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Kethrans had grown complacent during centuries of easy victories over helpless prey species. They had never faced an enemy that learned from every defeat, that adapted to every challenge, that grew stronger with every battle as their weapons tore through the last defenses. Deho found himself face to face with High Harvester Keth Moore, the alien leader who had ordered Earth's subjugation. The creature stood in the ruins of its command center, its metallic form damaged, but still defiant. The High Harvester was larger than the other Kethrans, its body covered in ceremonial armor that marked its rank. But up close, Deho could see the fear in its alien eyes. Your kind were meant to be consumed, the creature hissed through the universal translator. We have harvested 1,000 species. You are nothing special. Deho raised his weapon. A hybrid of human and Kethran technology that represented everything the Liberation Fleet had accomplished. Your kind were meant to learn, he replied. We are no longer your prey. The High Harvester's final moments were filled with something it had never experienced before, the helplessness of being hunted. For centuries, it had watched other species die with clinical detachment, seeing them as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Now it understood what those species had felt in their final moments. The final shot ended not just the harvester's life, but the entire harvesting era. As the last collective stronghold fell, Deho broadcast across the galaxy to any species. Still suffering under oppression, humanity remembers what it means to be hunted. We will find you. We will free you. And we will never stop hunting those who would make prey of the innocent. The message was transmitted on every frequency, translated into every known language, carried by communication networks that spanned the galaxy. Within hours, it would reach species that had never heard of humanity, worlds that were still under Kethran occupation, and survivors of harvesting operations who had given up hope. Standing before the vast starfield, Deho smiled grimly. The prey had become the predator, and the stars themselves had become humanity's hunting ground. The war was over, but the hunt would continue. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species might be suffering under oppression. Other predators might be harvesting innocent civilizations, but they would learn what the Kethrans had learned too late, that humanity never forgot its friends, never forgave its enemies, and never stopped hunting those who preyed on the innocent. The stars belonged to humanity now, and humanity would make sure they stayed free.